Bitterness kills the soul. Anthony Ray Hinton. Bending Not Breaking, Season 2, Episode 9. Bitter Work. And welcome back to another episode of Bending Not Breaking. Season 2, Episode 9. The episode is Bitter Work.
Bitter Work.
And if you can't tell from our quote and the title of the show, our lens this week is going to be what, Ben?
Bitterness.
Bitterness. We decided to just go hit the nail on the head and just talk about it, shall we?
Yeah, let's talk about
But
it.
before we get all to that, how's your week been? How was your week? Your 2 weeks. It's been a little while. We had to take a quick little break. You had a good 2 weeks.
I had a pretty good week at work this week. I feel like I've been ending and like getting to stuff on time, and I feel like I've been, feeling successful at work. So that's been nice.
Oh, I tried cooking again because I'm doing that cooking challenge.
Oh, yeah.
And I accidentally doubled the amount of cayenne pepper that was supposed to go on a fish, and it was bitter's probably not the word, but it wasn't good.
I was bitter about you cooking it.
It was the cayenne pepper particles floated through the kitchen for a while.
And my room.
Well,
literally couldn't stop coughing.
Sorry. Next time I'll try not to double the amount of cayenne pepper. But, yeah, that happened to me.
And, of course, we have Max Gongaware with us.
I'm always so grateful that he's here. Welcome, Max.
Thank you.
He's very, he's just...
Terse.
He's like that strong, silent type.
Oh.
Just...
What a catch.
Dark and mysterious. He is a catch.
With just the right amount of cayenne, too. Hello.
Ooh. A little saucy
He's
today.
saying he's
Max is a little
spicy.
saucy. We're recording on
I think spicy is more accurate than saucy if we're talking cayennes.
Yes, but... All right, and the mood is ruined.
What happened during this episode?
Before we get there, we have to ask Max, do we not?
That's what I'm saying.
So it is time for Max's Uninformed Recap.
Cap.
Max, are you ready?
I mean, y'all haven't given me any of my clues yet.
Well, are you ready for your clues?
Sure.
Okay.
Who am I, blue?
Get it?
Right. The first scene, Aang wakes up and is excited to learn some earthbending while the gang is sleeping in a canyon pass. The last scene is Zuko stands in a storm and screams to be hit by lightning. Your keywords are training, lightning bending, saber-toothed moose lion, redirection, and positive reinforcement. Those are your key phrases. Do you need any of those again, Mr. Gongaware?
Yeah, can you give me the beginning and end again?
The first scene, Aang wakes up excited to learn some earthbending while the gang sleeps in a canyon pass. And in the last scene, Zuko stands in a storm and screams to be hit by lightning.
At the top of a mountain.
Yes, very scary, very sad. We are getting into those moments in the season that I like to call the Great Depression of Avatar, which is like the next 6 episodes are just unbearable. Do you have something to say?
No.
Okay. Max, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
On your mark. Hold on, I'll pull the timer. You've got...
Because we stick so closely to the timer every time.
We're doing it right now. You're going to get 63 seconds.
Can't wait.
On your mark.
Who's Mark?
Get set. Go.
All right, so the episode begins when Aang wakes up and is excited to learn earthbending while the gang sleeps in a canyon pass. And of course, I know what a canyon pass is because I've been training on vocabulary of canyon passes. Now, when you're in a canyon, you have to pass on lightning bending because you shouldn't lightning bend while in a canyon. It's dangerous. And it attracts the saber-toothed moose lions. And once you attract the saber-toothed moose
30
lions,
seconds left.
You have to redirection them so that you can be more safe. And that's what Aang did. He was able to redirection them using a tactful palette of positive
15
reinforcement. So he was able to redirect the moose lions while using positive reinforcement, and then he went to sleep because it was a tired night. But then there was a lightning storm,
5,
and he screamed,
4,
and he wanted
3,
to get hit by the lightning
2,
because positive reinforcement.
1.
Nailed it, no doubt.
Well, Aang wasn't the one who was screaming in the lightning storm.
That was Zuko.
I think
duh.
you were particularly spot on with your redirection of the saber-toothed moose
Which
lion.
is that is exactly what happened.
I know that.
Yeah. That was close. Ben, are you ready for it? Do you want to go?
I'm waiting for him to watch an episode and then come in and like nail the recap.
That would be a fun thing for him
I
to just.
promise that's not going to happen.
So, Ben, do you want to do the recap this week, or do you want me to do it?
I
think you did the last one.
Well, then it's your turn.
Yeah.
You should totally do it.
All right. Is there a timer this time, or are we
There's
just...
always a timer.
Okay, great.
On your mark. Excuse me. Get set. And go.
Aang's decided to learn some earthbending, and so Toph and him go off and earthbend, and then we get a fun little dream sequence from Io of him playing with the sun and mourning his death. Zuko wakes up and offers him some tea, and Zuko needs to learn some stronger firebending to take on Azula, because she's crazy and needs to go down. Katara offers advice to Toph about her teaching methods with Aang, and try some different strategies, including kettlebell workouts and, positive reinforcement. Toph blinds Aang so he can sense a boulder that's coming. Yeah, thanks, Katara.
10 seconds.
And Aang jumps into the boulder's path, or jumps out of it, and Toph lays into him and going into a waterbend.
5,
Zuko continues to
4,
struggle. They continue
3,
to train, and eventually
2,
Aang saves the day.
1. Wow. I'm impressed.
Yeah. I mean, you can summarize quickly the episode. It depends on how detailed you want to get.
Sure.
So we're talking about some bitterness. Ben,
Yeah, we are.
what's bitterness?
Well, I think that there's a lot of things you can talk about bitterness. I think one of the things you can think about is anger or disappointment from being treated unfairly. I think that's the dictionary definition
Some
that came up on
resentment thrown in
Google.
there.
Yeah, a little bit of resentment. It's when it comes to like your taste buds, it's kind of like the opposite of sweetness in a way. That's how it was written when I read about it.
Interesting.
How do you feel about that?
I don't like. I go back to the cayenne pepper. Like that wasn't sweet, but I don't know if bitter's the word that I would have described it with. But maybe that's exactly the word I should describe
I don't
it
think
with.
sweet is
I don't know if
opposite
they're
of spicy,
Right.
right? Spicy and sweet are different, but
Yeah.
they're not opposites. What this is suggesting is that bitterness is the opposite of
Which
sweetness.
maybe.
Yeah.
I like my coffee bitter.
I was also read an article about bitterness there are like 7 elements to bitterness, and they came
I read
up.
one that said 9 elements to bitterness.
Well, let's see which ones
let's talk about them for a little
So
bit. shall
I'll
we?
read mine. You can talk about yours.
This is more of the 9 habits of people who
Oh, interesting. All right.
exude bitterness on a typical basis.
Cool. Me first.
Okay.
So self-pity,
Okay.
desire to make someone else suffer,
Mm.
vindictiveness, looking for a fight, sociopathic pride, resentment, and then narcissism. Those are the 7 things that came up when I read about bitterness. What about you?
So these are the habits of people who, if you can break these habits, they can make you feel better and not bitter. One is not forgiving others. One is not forgiving yourself. All or nothing thinking. Holding others to a higher standard than you hold yourself. Believing that things will never get better. Believing you have less control over your life than you really do. Believing the myth of arrival. Do you want me to dive into that a little bit?
Yeah.
The myth of arrival refers to the idea that once you have arrived at a certain point in your life, everything will fall into place.
Oh, yeah.
So once you get to a certain point, you never have to continue
yeah.
working, or everything should be perfect.
I'll be happy when
Yes.
X, Y, or Z happens.
Or I've gotten married, and so me and my partner
Everything will
are
be easy
set,
once I get married.
right? Like we don't have to work on anything once we're at the stage. So that
Why would I
things
have to
kinda
deal
fall
with
in
that?
place. Overgeneralizing, and then the last one is not practicing gratitude.
I think gratitude's so important.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the one? Can you quickly recap those? Just speed read them again. There was one that really.
Not forgiving others, not forgiving yourself, all or nothing thinking, holding others to a higher standard than you hold
Stop.
yourself.
That's the one. So for me, holding people to a higher standard than you hold yourself is really interesting because I like to think I have pretty high standards. And I think that I have high standards of others, but also of me. And so I have felt bitter around people in my life when I'm holding them to a higher standard, but I feel like I'm holding us to the same standard. And even though I sometimes meet it, I don't feel like I'm being held to a less high standard than the ones I'm holding them, but I still feel bitter. How do you feel about that? Does that?
I wonder if that is a perception that, yeah, you might hold yourself to high standards, which plays into the not forgiving yourself or being too hard on yourself type of thing. But I also wonder if it's perception of like, are you truly holding yourself to those same standards that you're expecting of other people, or if that is you perceive that you're meeting those standards.
Interesting. I think I'd need outside eyes to help me with that.
That's
I
like
guess.
other people, yeah.
Yeah.
So there might be moments in my life where I'm saying, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to be doing all of these things, and someone could easily turn back to me and say like, well, those are the standards you're setting, and I might say, I totally do that, and in their eyes, I don't. I would use being present in programs that I work with, right? So I might tell my directors that I work with, hey, you need to be present in your programs, just like I'm present in your programs, and they might say, you're not present in my programs.
You know
and
what
I go,
comes to mind is I always grew up, and I have since learned and grown, but I kind of grew up believing that I cared about others more than they cared about me. And that is something I had a conversation with one of my friends who is graduating college this coming May, and that's all they could talk about is I feel like I love people so much, and I always am pouring more into others, and I found myself being like, man, I see so much of myself in you, and I struggle with that, and I kind of still struggle with that sometimes, but just the way we express love and the things of that nature are just so hard to read that it's very easy to tell yourself a story that is easy to believe when it may or may not be true.
yeah. The stories we tell ourselves are...
You're jumping into next episode. I already took notes on that one.
the stories we tell ourselves?
Yeah.
All right, we can not talk about that. Sorry. I apologize. Wow.
I feel a little bitter that you brought it up.
Bitter right there. Let's talk about bitter. Let's give out some award. Who wins the not bitter award? Like, who's the character that you were like either pleasantly surprised with or just out of everything that goes on, like, isn't very bitter this episode?
Oh wow, I didn't. It's really interesting because I think that there are moments that each character I expected a little bit more bitterness, or I would have been okay with more bitterness. It wouldn't have seemed out of character from Aang for half the episode. Like, he was being pressured by Toph. He was being taught in a way that he was not used to. She would acknowledge when he was successful. There were moments where he was like, "Oh, you did this right," and
your stance was right.
Yeah, and there was this smile and
your form was right, and
I
then
think
you quit.
Well, and I think those moments of success sustained him until where he started to not feel that success anymore, right? And so he was so eager to keep trying and do things until he failed in ways where he was not able to see progress.
Right.
When that boulder was rolling towards him when he was blindfolded, he was so scared and so defeated after he moved from it because Toph yelled at him that's when I feel like that self-defeat really emerged and led to him starting to feel more and more bitter. But preceding that, I feel like he was very not bitter compared to what I expected.
Yeah, in that moment you see a lot of regret, embarrassment, shame.
Yeah.
Shame.
He's the Avatar. He should be able to do this,
mm-hmm.
right? And it's that kind of talk.
When Toph kind of lays into him.
In
a way that I would argue that she's like, you had all the right ingredients and you didn't put them together is pretty much what she was saying. Like, you just quit.
So there's a point where I wonder where this is, and you might like help me understand where this lies. There's a point at which Toph starts laying into Aang purposefully, as in trying to get him to, specifically when she pulls out his nuts and starts eating them and cracking them with his
Stick.
Thank
Staff.
you. Staff. That was pretty innuendo-full. Sorry, my bad.
Phrasing.
Kids show.
Yeah, but like moral of the story is like she's intentionally trying to goad him at that point. Whereas before it felt like she was just that was her natural teaching style. Do you think that she was intentional that whole time and trying to like bulldoze in a way to do that, or is that just her personality?
No, I think that it could, yes, and like, couldn't it be? It could be both, right? Like, she was intentional, and it's her personality. I think when Tara brings up you need to change your teaching style, she doesn't. Like, she says, so I think she's fully aware of what she's doing.
Well, I wonder if, and part of me wonders if like she realizes this is what Aang needs, or if she went into it knowing what Aang needs. I wonder if she developed some learning throughout that episode as well as Aang. Does that make sense?
Sure. Because I think like if we look at the saber-tooth
Moose
lion, you'd never really feel for that Aang's in any danger.
No. He's clearly able to defend himself.
He's not harming it, but he is continuously like moving it and redirecting it with air.
And he ended up being successful.
Mm-hmm. And so at that point, she wasn't leaving him in a place that was unsafe, but she was letting him do that. Then he starts to get bitter as he notices that she was there the whole time and wasn't going to help. And then she talks to him about redirecting that, similar to the way that Iroh talks about redirecting lightning, right? So I wonder if all of this is an allegory for when we receive mistreatment, how do we redirect that in a way that is...
I love that.
In a way that is helpful or beneficial.
I really love that reading.
When we feel that, when we feel this energy coming in, how do we put it into our gut, shift it around, deal with it so that we don't hurt ourselves or others?
Well, and don't let it go through our heart. Let it go through our gut, right? Don't let it like cut us so deep that it goes through our heart and like cuts us and hurts us to the point where we can't recover, right? Let it go through ourselves. Let us process it, but let it not touch the important pieces of us that won't survive if it does touch that.
Feel it.
Yeah.
And then how do you redirect it so that energy becomes more productive on the other side of
a
things?
really beautiful reading that I didn't think about. I really love that. That's so cool.
So, because that's when you hear Iroh talk about the lightning, that's what I thought about. And then I also felt like when you feel like that anger in Aang, she even says like, now use that.
I'm really mad I didn't think about that.
Don't forgive yourself. That's one of the habits you have to do to not be
that's
bitter.
why we do this, right? Because like I wouldn't have felt this like sense of like, wow, that feels exactly what that is meant to be teaching, right? And so doing this with someone else is really cool.
Yeah.
And so,
which is like why we like to do it with the people who listen to this show and send us in
interact
voicemails.
With us. Send us
that type of stuff for what does it mean to you? We love hearing that type of stuff.
Absolutely.
I think what I was getting at earlier, one of my favorite characters that I think wins the like bitterness free award.
Oh, is Iroh.
I
didn't even think about that.
Is Sokka. Like
his sarcasm was like intense though.
Towards the end, he gets to a moment where he's like, when he's finally like, "Yay, help us here!"
Oh, I feel like you're caught between a rock and a hard place.
Please get me out. Like it starts to build up, but like even as it happens, there's this weird moment of like, "Yep, I did this.
This seems like something I would do.
Pretty much my fault." And we'll make the best of it as it goes.
That's fair.
It easily could have been like, if other people were helping me search for food, this wouldn't have happened. I'm always the person going out and trying to get like camping, like meals for camp. No one's coming to look for me. How dare they? I can't believe they don't notice I'm gone. Like all that stuff could have been said, and he doesn't say a thing and trust them. He's like, they'll find their way to me at some point.
Yeah.
And they do.
Well, and like, what a remarkable amount of trust, because I can imagine so many different people in my life that would have been, where were you? I've been here for hours. I've been doing all these things. I've been having to sit here, and I got attacked by a saber-toothed moose lion, and it's just...
This is Foo Cuddly Poops.
Yeah, he ended up naming it. It ended up bringing him
I
food
wish
and putting
we got
it...
to hang out with Foo Cuddly
Yeah.
Poops more this series.
What if, like, that
I don't
became
think we
Sokka's,
do.
like, partner?
Mm-hmm.
That would have been fun.
I mean, I guess we already have Mush Mush. Like, we don't need
Mo.
another one. But Foo Cuddly Poops. Would be a fun animal name. Your next dog. Foo Cuddly Poops.
You won't.
Yeah, I don't know how to shorten that into like a...
Foo-foo.
Yeah, but like have it be a really big, gnarly, like... Mastiff.
Yeah.
He's like, that's Foo.
Yeah. I want to go back to the beginning, if we can.
Back to the beginning. It's
that
everything you want.
It's not a real song.
That is. It's by the band
You're wrong.
Boy, which is a German-Austrian duo, singer-songwriter.
So at the beginning
Point!
of the episode, Aang is super excited to learn earthbending, and he's like, "Oh my god, teach me this." And she's like, "Hold on, let's just start with the basics."
Right.
But before that, he starts by calling Toph Sifu Toph, which is a term for teacher, essentially.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Katara's like, you never called me Sifu. You never called me teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You never gave me that amount of respect. And so I've been struggling with the concept and idea of respect for a long time, because when I was working at a summer camp back in the day, I had a staff member who challenged me in a way, because one of the YMCA core character traits is respect. And one of the things that they talk about is how, like, respect is all the things. It's the golden rule. And there's so many Bible verses that reference this. There's so many, all these things that talk about how respect is so important. And this staff member came to me and said, the closer I get to someone, the more respect I lose for them. And I was like, no, that's not how it works. And I see this in this scene. I see it, right? He has more respect for Toph because Toph has come along. They don't know each other as well. And she came along under the assumption that she would be his teacher, right? And for Katara, they were first friends, and then she became his instructor and his teacher. Yes?
Yeah.
And so it seems really interesting. Respect is given more freely to those we are not as close with, and we lose respect for a person as we gain friendship.
Which I don't know if that's... I think that depends on the definition or how you define respect in those moments. I wonder if... Because for me, I think of this... Oh, I know them. I'm more comfortable with them. I can say these things jokingly and they won't hurt because they'll know it's a joke because we know each other.
But that's a loss.
But
that
is not
action
true, right?
is not respectful.
Right. Yes.
Like, true or false,
Yes.
right? That is true. Yes, the intention behind it is I can get away with this. I can say this. But that's exactly what loss of respect is.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, because I think when I think of loss of respect, I think of the way that I
It's
value someone's advice or
Exactly.
the way that I look towards them, which is like I would argue that like
that's
that
different.
you don't lose, but depending on so when you have this massive umbrella that covers what is respect,
Exactly, it's a huge word.
Then it is right. Like if you're saying you're not being respectful, are you losing respect in that moment, or is?
But isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Because the first time I heard that, I wanted to argue like so hardcore with this person, and I was like, no, that you're wrong, and I didn't have a compelling argument to come back with it, and I've been thinking about it for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because it struck such a powerful chord with me. Like, in the way it was described was, oh, with my friends, I'll make these jokes and do that. But I feel an immense amount of respect for my boss at the same time period.
Mm-hmm.
And you know him as well. And I have so much respect for him, and I would also not make the same jokes.
Right.
I would also not say the same things and have the same conversations. right?
Mhm.
There's that invisible line, that barrier, that boundary that I'm unwilling to cross because of my respect for the position, the relationship. And I found that to be really fascinating because I feel incredibly close with him. And that boundary is really powerful at the same time. And I just wonder what that's like to gain intimacy but lose that element of respect. And I wonder if that's where that degradation of like the high divorce rate and things like that in our country. I wonder if the loss of respect is a lead into that. I wonder if we revisited respect in that capacity, if it would lead to less bitterness, if you will.
Yeah. I wonder if that's all. Like, the longer you know someone, does bitterness get to like add up longer over time?
From the lack of respect,
Yeah.
right?
So like, or perceived lack of
Correct.
like
Yes.
respect. So, but then we get this moment of respect and loss of bitterness. The moment that Aang then
Oh,
says
what a
it to
beautiful
Katara,
moment.
and it is such a beautiful moment where she's teaching him, and he recognized she made this comment earlier, and I respect her just as much, and she is my waterbending master. And
Yeah.
Sifu Katara.
Well, and just like the humility that Aang exudes in that moment to be able to do that to someone.
And you can tell it means the world to her in that moment.
It does. Like her eyes tear up. It's a beautiful moment, and the humility is really important. And I think respect requires humility, and I think that combination leads to a solution to bitterness, based off what we've seen in this show.
So, do we see respect as an antidote to bitterness?
Maybe in
Like, is that what we're finding right now through conversation?
Maybe in combination with humility. Like I see that
Self-respect, respect for others.
Yeah.
And I would argue that, and as we talk about the big umbrella term that respect is, I would argue self-respect also means understanding the stories that you tell yourself.
Well,
Are stories that you tell yourself.
Huge side note, left turn. The other podcast that I run, the Vespers Project, is releasing an episode on respect very soon. So if you want to take a deep dive into respect, that might be a good place to check it out. Just FYI.
Yeah, for y'all that don't know, the Vespers Project, also under the umbrella of the Archivy Network,
Correct.
Has a podcast that is hosted by Ben Pruitt, where he talks about a lot of these lenses that we're talking about, but it's like more of a songs with stories and like deep thought into meaning without like a
And we have a special guest every episode.
yeah who writes a specific Vesper, and then they talk about it. So it's really nice. So instead of doing this with like a show, they just do it about with like life experiences and other different art forms that play a part in that. So go check out the Vespers Project if you
I bet Aang would write
like
a killer
hearing that.
Vespers.
I bet you is he a good writer?
I mean, he is when he's later in his life, I'm sure.
Sure. Let's dive. We get I think it's worth highlighting. We get some of Iroh's most iconic quotes in this episode.
Yeah, we do.
One of the first ones being that is very recognizable is pride is not the opposite of shame, but its source. True humility is the only antidote to shame.
Boom. And that kind of goes, I didn't even think about that, but that's what we were just talking about, right? Respect plus humility might be an antidote to bitterness. And I wonder if that, like this says, according to Iroh, that it's the antidote to shame as well.
Yeah, because like you get this moment where Zuko's like, "I'm proud. I'm not ashamed," and Iroh's like, one and the same." Like,
yeah,
which is really cool. The other moment we get in this, which is as he's teaching him about the balance of all the elements together, we get it is important to draw wisdom from many different places.
Well, and that's the whole point of the show, right? That's why we do our devotions the way we do at the end of the episode, right? We focus on all four elements, one each week, because we need all four in each of us in order to be whole, in order to be complete, in order to be full, to recognize our wholeness not as separate but as one.
We also see what I think for the first time is a very iconic tree in Iroh's dream sequence.
Oof. Why? Why are you going there?
Because we know it's coming and we have to mentally prep ourselves. We are going to have to do an episode on the Tales of Ba Sing Se.
You sure we don't want to skip it?
It is going to stink.
We can skip it.
I don't think we can.
What if we skipped
We
it?
can't skip it.
We have to feel our feelings.
That's the whole point of this.
We have to
We're
feel our
talking about
feelings.
feeling our feelings.
All right. Other big moments of bitterness in this episode that we
there's
noticed.
so much. There's so many.
Well, let's go because we don't want to take too long. Are there moments that we want to highlight where this bitterness cuts deep?
Yeah. Okay. Can we really touch Aang and earthbending for a second? And so we kind of briefly touched this at the beginning, but Aang is really an airbender at heart because that was his first element, and so he is very used to dodging. He's used to moving around a problem and solving it from a different direction rather than hitting things head on. And one of the things that
Or being immovable.
Or being movable. And one of the moment where he is meditating is such a powerful scene for me because that is me in a nutshell. I really vibe with him in that moment. He's sitting there trying to meditate. Toph comes up, says, "Hey, I'm going to eat your food. I'm going to crush them with this really important thing for you." And Aang is like, "No, I have no problems with you eating my food. No." And then he's like, "But you probably shouldn't." And then he's like, no, it's an antique. And he just like inside. And then Toph walks away, like banging his staff against rocks and things. And then he just goes, and he tries to just meditate it off. And I think a lot of times what happens is we try to master ourselves rather than addressing the issue head on with someone else.
Right, like it's your problem.
Like it's my problem rather than the fact that they are doing something to antagonize me.
Mm-hmm.
Or just doing something that bothers me. Or doing something in a way that I feel like I need to address it. Right? And
I feel like you have to, like, because you have to address it with that person.
Correct.
Not internally.
Well, and the story I tell myself is that I'm not, I haven't mastered my emotions enough if this is bothering me, right? I haven't done enough self-work if this little thing is bothering me. And therefore, what happens in me is I become bitter with me.
Mm-hmm.
I become bitter with the process. I become bitter. And then subtly because that bitterness is focused on me, it's not focused on the other person until it's too late. And I realize it's been subtly on that person for so long that it becomes toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that just really vibed with me because then Katara walks up and he's like, "I'm meditating here." And what a funny line to be someone who's meditating and someone who's trying to work through something and then to come off with that much
bitterness.
Mm-hmm. Right? It's just such a interesting view that I just thought that was a really well played scene, and it's just so true to real life for a lot of people that like kudos to the creators for masterfully putting that in.
When we see that, because that's a moment where Toph is like, "I'm just wanting you to stick up for yourself. Like I'm wanting you to
yeah,
do
her
that."
intentions are good.
Yeah,
right.
It's probably not the way to do it.
Maybe not the best way.
But yeah, that is a moment where you start to see that bitterness rear its head for Aang, and almost take it out on somebody else who
it was just masterfully put on screen.
Deserving. Yeah. No. And then this is also an episode with Zuko where
we should talk more about Zuko.
He does not start as bitter as you think he should.
That's what I wrote.
Because he's so focused on helping Iroh. And even he, like, when he notices, like, "I need you to teach me firebending or stronger firebending, and I know I shouldn't want to hurt my sister, and you're going to tell me that, like, I should try to get along with her." Like, he is more empathetic and understanding in this moment than he probably has been in the series.
Literally what I wrote was, Zuko starts the conversation about Azula very calmly and logically. I have come to expect more bitterness from Zuko.
Mm-hmm.
I can see the change.
Yeah, which is nice. And then when he isn't getting lightning bending the way that he is hoping to, you see that same frustration that we see in Aang. So there's a really cool parallel between Zuko and Aang both trying to learn a skill. And you see him get to this moment where he starts to really... he needs to prove that he can do this. To the point to where he's like, "All right, I can lightning bend. Teach me how to lightning bend." And Iroh's like, I'm not going to hit you with lightning. Like, I'm not gonna do. That's so
Yeah,
dumb.
when you talk about the redirection.
No, like
Yeah.
he's like, you can do it, but I'm not gonna like make you do it in this moment.
I'm not gonna
because
shoot lightning in you.
yeah,
That's
terrible.
crazy.
But he is so desperate, and I feel my perception is he's so desperate to prove to himself that he can do it, and that he's worth doing it. Like that he's got value and he can do it. That he has to go prove by standing in a storm. And talk about one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the
tragic.
series is him begging the gods, the spirits, to hit him with lightning.
That was
because
my question.
You've never not done this to me. You've only hit me with lightning before, so like why not now? Now that I know how to redirect.
Well,
it?
that was my question. My mini episode was on faith, and like I have been questioning like where does faith come up in this whole series? Where is the religion? Is there any? And I see this, and I'm wondering who Zuko's talking to,
right?
Or what? Or like, I was like, wow. Is this a plead with God? Is this a plead with nature? Is this a plea with, like, what is it? And I was just very curious.
It almost reminds me of the Tao from the Taoist religion.
Sure.
That it is this thing that exists that is bigger than us.
Tell us more.
It just is, right? It is this thing, and it is, and it's balance, and it's everything else, and it just like it almost comes to me that it's not personified in this way. It is just this thing, and I wonder if that's kind of how he's viewing life right now. Is like there's something going on.
Life.
But we look at it as, especially from an Americanized culture that's so heavily rooted in, with Christianity being a part of it, as a personified God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is not just an Americanized thing. There's so many religions that have personifications of.
Yes, that's correct.
Of a greater spirit, and so I think that's what we closely recognize that as like this prayer, this like yelling at God, and which for him, I don't think it's necessarily God. It could be a spirit. It could be be life. It could be.
I think it's really interesting because this episode and the next several episodes, we are going to see a lot of pain,
suffering.
Yes.
And that's just in the mirror.
Well, and what happens is over the next several episodes, what we're going to see is a lot of anger masking the underlying emotion.
Hurt.
Like whatever, grief, sadness, profound sadness. There's so many different emotions that we're gonna see, and like in this, Zuko is so mad. And then that last 2 seconds is we see the rain going down his face, and then we see the tears. At first, we're like, "Oh, he's not crying," and because he's so mad, and then he just bursts into tears and starts crying from this helplessness.
And there's that line that's so subtle and gets ignored so quickly, as it's happening, which is I try this and it blows up in my face, just like everything else. And It's such a simple line, but how often do we hear people say stuff like that we just fully ignore when that is such a moment of desperation? It seems like a throwaway line.
I just want someone to hear it.
I just want someone to hear it. Please, someone respond to this because I'm looking for it.
Yeah. Oh, what a tragic moment. It's just so I'm so impressed with this show that it's able to pull that amount of emotion from you. And you know what? Like the first time I watched the show, I didn't get that sense of. I didn't get that. You know,
You didn't get his
I got it.
hurt?
I understood it, but
You didn't realize how tragic
the
it really
emotional
was.
pull is stronger the more and more I watch it, and the more we discuss it and talk about these characters, the more and more attachment I feel towards them, and the more understanding, and the more empathy that I have gained for these characters. And so I just feel the show gets better and better the more we talk about it, and the more we analyze, and the more we think about it.
So one of the things I've realized with not just this show, but with art forms or experiences more often than not, is the more that I've done emotional work and working with people and connecting, the more that I will tear up or cry while watching TV shows or movies, And then the more that I allow myself to do that, the more frequently it actually starts happening. And I feel like we've talked about that before, not on this podcast, but in life, of this moment of like the moment that you kind of let that open, that like the more frequently those moments start to happen. And so as
It's almost
I'm
like
going,
floodgates, almost, or
yeah,
a dam breaking.
and you
if
hear that all
will.
the time, right? As soon as you let the floodgates open, but it's normally used in like I feel like a negative context.
Exactly. Yeah.
In which it really isn't. But the more that I've done work around this type of stuff, or the more that I've learned about more human experiences with kids that I've worked with and parents that I've worked with, the more frequently it is that like the first time I watched the show, I definitely didn't tear up when when Zuko
Same.
was on the mountain, and in this moment, it was almost just like even in talking about it right now,
I know,
you
it's
start to
so
feel it.
tragic. Yeah.
But I think that says a lot about just the work and understanding of your emotions and letting yourself feel those things and letting yourself connect with people on that. Because even though I've never experienced my father beating me in an Agni Kai, or have never felt, I don't think I've ever truly felt the amount of
Trauma.
shame and
True
trauma
yeah.
that Zuko's gone through. I can connect with that emotion and recognize it for what it is, and understand that I can then also connect of moments of pain for me, and saying like I felt that way in this moment, even though it's a completely separate moment, and it allows you to create that connection and empathy. Because I think there's that misconception of you've never experienced this, so you don't know what I'm feeling. And the reality is that's just
that bitterness
not the
is
case.
real,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's such a real bitter feeling. Oh, bitterness sucks.
Yep. So, do we have anything else we want to highlight before we move on to our final parts of this episode?
I mean, there's always more to talk about, but I feel like we've covered what we need to cover.
Max, anything to add?
I've got nothing for you, but thank you.
I will always ask.
Might as well.
Yeah. Never hurts to ask. All right, we will be right back. We do not have a voicemail this week, so we will highlight that. Please send in voicemails, voice memos to us with your feelings. Again, it's honestly one of my favorite parts of the show is hearing how y'all experience the show, why it makes it special to you, questions that you might have, things that you disagree with us on from previous episodes. I don't care if it's from season 1. If you've got something that you were like, oh man, I read that moment just completely differently, send us a voice memo and let us know.
Absolutely.
To thearcofE@gmail.com. Again, that's thearcofE@gmail.com. And then so
BNB pod _pod.
Yep, BNB_pod is our Twitter and our Instagram. We'll talk more about that. And we'll also, at the end of this episode, we're going to highlight some new podcasts or some different podcasts that are also out there from the Arc of E network.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
So that if y'all are interested in that, you can jump on. But please send us voice memos to thearcofE@gmail.com. We would love to listen to them. And we will be right back with our weekly devotion. And we're back. We are going to be doing our daily devotion. Again, no voicemail this week, so please send those into thearcofE@gmail.com. But we are going to be talking about bitterness and what our weekly devotion is through earth, the element of earth this time around. Ben, we'll start with you. What's your weekly goal? What's your thing you're going to try to do this week?
Yeah, so as I talked about earlier in the episode, I'm struck by that scene with Aang meditating and his trying to master himself rather than addressing the issue head on. They talk about throughout the episode how it's like it's uncomfortable. I don't want to deal with that, and that's something that I struggle with. It's uncomfortable, and I don't like having uncomfortable conversations if I can avoid it, and I want to master myself and not feel like I have to worry. So I want to learn to stand my ground. I want to put my 2 feet on the ground, take a stance, and say what's bothering me when it does. And then what that will do is I need to start seeing that as not selfish. I need to see that as me taking a step towards making the relationship better rather than me taking and me not being enough. And so that's how I'm going to lean into solving my bitterness problem, I think.
think that's great, and I think it's also really important to highlight, because I think what happens a lot in these moments when people are like, I'm going to take a stand for myself, which is, you absolutely should. You should absolutely set boundaries, and I'm never going to say that you shouldn't. What happens is similar to when I think people say, like, I'm just being honest, or I need to tell the truth, and it's done in such a way that is not compassionate or empathetic. At the same time,
100%.
And I know that you were not saying that you're just gonna and I'm gonna fight everyone who makes me
Oh
mad.
yeah, punch him in the mouth for sure.
But I think it's really important to highlight that when you do stand up for yourself, when you do set boundaries, when you do have these conversations, you have to still do it empathetically and compassionately.
100%.
You have to lead with heart. And I think so many times people are like, I don't understand why they just got upset with me. I was just telling them that their cooking is terrible. And you're like, yeah, well, like...
You could have done that in a way.
You could have done that in a way that was super kind
100%.
and compassionate, and not one that's just
Yeah, I really appreciate you lifting that up for not only for me, but for our listeners as well. I think that a lot of times that can be a misconception when it comes to standing up for ourselves.
As we talk about bitterness for me and the way that I feel grounded, I'm going to go back to that initial article that we talked about the habits that can lead to bitterness, and not practicing gratitude being one of them. And I think for me, it's just a consistent reminder of this week, spending time every day just thinking about what are 2 to 3 things that I'm just genuinely thankful for. And it doesn't have to be this massive thing. It can be the fact that, like, I've got a car that starts. Like, that is something to have gratitude for. Or I've got food in my fridge. That is something that I can show gratitude for. And so for me, it's what are those 2 to 3 things each day that I want to start my day with by just showing gratitude. And if it's people, letting them know that I'm grateful for them and why I'm grateful for them, which I think is really important. Max, anything you want to add to the very end of the episode before we move on?
Not at this time.
Next week, we are going to be talking about the library.
The library.
Which, oh, look at that. Another sad, terrible ending.
Yeah, that's rough. That's rough, buddy.
These next ones are going to be tough.
Yeah, the next several episodes, y'all brace yourselves.
I remember we posted on Instagram at BNB_pod and about just prepping ourselves for the Tales of Bossing Say episode, and someone was like, I literally just skip from the library past past Appa's last days or lost days.
We're doing that, right?
We're not. I don't think we can. But someone's just like, yeah, I just skipped those 6 episodes, and I never watched them when I rewatched the series. We're going to challenge you to watch those with us, and so you can share in the grief that comes with these upcoming episodes. So we will be doing the library next week through the lens of Deception, not to be confused with the Christopher Nolan movie. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining us.
I appreciate you.
I'm Sunshine Mayfield.
This has been Pruitt.
And this has been Bending, Not Breaking. Thank you for listening.